Do you ever catch yourself saying, English is just crazy? Maybe your students come across a tricky word and you tell them, you just have to memorize that one, or this is the part you have to know by heart. But deep down, you know it's still confusing. Here's the truth. English isn't random. It's a wonderfully complex system, and once you understand how that system works, through sound, structure, and meaning, everything changes. That's what Sarah, Paul, and I teach inside Mastering Morphology. This isn't another curriculum. It's deep teacher knowledge inside a practical, comprehensive course that finally shows you how words really work. No more exceptions, no more gimmicks or patching holes with memorization or phonics alone. It's time to go beyond sound it out and give your students the framework they need to truly understand words. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start teaching with confidence, join us inside Mastering Morphology. Enrollment is open now, so we invite you to click the link in the show notes to get started. You're listening to episode 74 of Literacy in Color. Today's guest is someone I've been really excited to bring on the podcast. I'm joined by Viv Ramakrishnan, the co-founder of Project Read AI, an AI co-teacher designed specifically to support the science of reading. Before founding Project Read AI, Viv was an award-winning teacher at Freedom Preparatory Charter Schools in Memphis and a co-founder of One City Schools in Madison, Wisconsin. He brings a rare perspective to this work as someone who deeply understands both the realities of the classroom and the possibilities of technology. In this episode, we're digging into what AI can do for foundational literacy, why tools like ChatGPT struggle with phonics, and how AI can function as a co-teacher without ever replacing the human expertise at the heart of literacy instruction. Welcome to the Literacy in Color podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Sullivan, a science of reading advocate with over a decade of experience as a reading interventionist and literacy coach. I'm passionate about making evidence-based instruction both effective and engaging. If you're interested in captivating our learners on reading fluently and understanding language, or as I like to call it, keeping it colorful, then you've found the right place. Each week, we'll explore intriguing lit bits and practical strategies around the science of reading and structured literacy to help you be colorful and teach colorfully. Are you ready to bring literacy to life? Let's color outside the lines and make an impact together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Literacy in Color. It is a true delight today to be chatting with Viv Ramakrishnan, and he is the founder and visionary creator behind Project Read AI. And if you're currently an educator, there's a good chance that you've been using this tool at your disposal, because at this point, it's in over 50% of schools in the United States, which is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations on that. But before we dive in, I just want to say welcome to the show, Viv. It's so nice to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel honored that you thought I would be a valuable guest for the podcast.
Of course. I know we got to meet at the Reading League in person, and Viv presented a session all about AI and implications for education. And the room was so packed that people were lined up out the door, still listening, not even inside of the room. So kudos to you for that too.
Well, I like to say that they came in spite of me and because of the importance of artificial intelligence and obviously the science of reading if you're at the Reading League conference. So I think I was just the vessel for what was a topic or a set of topics that people were very interested in.
Yeah, and hopefully this episode is going to continue that conversation. So you like to refer to Project Read AI as a co-teacher for those who are implementing evidence-based instruction, foundational skills in the science of reading. So maybe you can take a minute to briefly introduce yourself and then share how you got into this role and what sparked you to create Project Read AI. Was there a problem in this literacy landscape where you were like, oh, I want to tackle that one. I want to help fix that problem. Maybe there was a particular moment that led you down this road.
Yeah, there's a short version and a long version. I'll try to do the medium version, which was I've been passionate about education since the time I was in high school. And that was a result of growing up in a really diverse school system and seeing close friends of mine who just had very different trajectories while in school, and certainly since then. And in some ways that was wedded to, maybe what they did or did not pour into school, but oftentimes it wasn't. And while I was in high school, I became involved in starting and running a tutoring program for my fellow football teammates. And that just kind of lit the spark for my interest in education. And since then, I've been involved and worn a variety of hats in the world of education. So in college, I was doing a lot of econ and stats research around education policy and GED tutoring and all of that good stuff. I ended up teaching high school and elementary school. I helped start a preschool when I was in college and then returned home and helped grow that full-time vertically, and have been a school chef as needed and custodian as needed. That, we wear a bunch of different hats when you're starting something small. All of which is to say, I don't think that my journey to the point where we are now was some recognition early on that there's something deeply wrong with how we're teaching literacy. No, in fact, I didn't know that until I had to step into first grade and got my butt kicked and realized that, hey, the way I've been taught how to teach reading in my own education is different from what, at least in the way of foundational skills, I really felt like our students needed and what the foundational skills curriculum I was using at the time required. So at a high level, I think that this really came from a deep interest in education and passion for educational equity. And if you truly are committed to that, I don't think you can look at the data and or spend any time in an elementary school and reach anything other than the conclusion that one of, if not the highest leverage thing you can work on is early literacy.
Yeah, amazing. I love all of the hats that you wore, from even custodian to chef. That I think makes you really relatable to anyone in the education landscape.
I know way more than anybody would ever want to know about compliance with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's school nutrition program.
See, there you go. When we think about AI, things like ChatGPT make AI feel really new, but it's not necessarily this new type of technology. It's just a new platform that people are trying to get accustomed to and learn how those things kind of work. So maybe you can take a moment to explain what even is AI and explain some of the terminology around large language models versus generative AI, and give a distinction between some of those things.
Totally. I'll try to do a version of this where I think like a slide is very helpful for people to see. But to your point, artificial intelligence as a broader field and concept has been around for a long time and can be broadly thought of as any computer system that can perform human-like tasks. And that's kind of vague, but really the Cambrian explosion, if you will, of AI in our day-to-day life came about in late 2022 with the release of ChatGPT, which is an example of generative AI. And for years, there have been technology researchers that are looking at advancing our own understanding of artificial intelligence and building new ways of doing these human-like tasks. And that's really what all this generative AI is, which is examples of a specific type of model, to be very technical, a transformer model that allows you to generate text, images, audio, video, but generate content based on prompts or user requests that you provide. And that is something that only has really started to emerge in the last couple of years and seemed so useful that it's really touched every part of society now. But artificial intelligence originally, like that includes a bunch of other stuff. So if you've applied for a credit card before, for the last 2 decades, it really hasn't been somebody that's sitting there giving you a thumbs up or down on your application or deciding at what terms to extend you credit. No, it's been the information that you provide is reviewed by a machine learning algorithm, or another example of an old school AI system that was actually deciding whether or not to extend you credit. So there have been ways that artificial intelligence has been a part of our lives in ways that we might not appreciate. But really, it's these generative AI models and a subset of those called large language models, or LLMs, that really have kind of taken society by storm over the last couple of years.
And those large language models in particular, at the Reading League, you gave a really great analogy how those can be like a GPS for language. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's the way I think about them. Again, going back to what happened before we had, by way of analogy, when you used to want to navigate to a destination, if you were going on a family trip or whatever, and you're trying to put in the hotel address that you were staying at, you'd go put in your home address. You'd go into MapQuest or Yahoo Maps and you'd put in like the address of that hotel. You'd print them out and you just hope that you get there and make all the right turns along the way. And if you miss a turn and you're like, wait, we've been going way too far, then you try to figure out how to backtrack. GPS has changed that. So the first one being those little Garmin GPSs that you'd put on your dashboard. And then smartphones really subsumed those because then you started to have Apple Maps or Google Maps on your phone. I think about large language models as a GPS for language, period. So you put in the prompt or your message to ChatGPT or Gemini from Google or Anthropic from Claude. Those are all applications of large language models. And you describe where you want to go. You say, build me this, or I have a question about that, or I need help doing this. And it tries to provide a response that brings you to that desired destination. The other reason why I make this analogy is because more precise directions are better. Let's say, so the Reading League conference was in Illinois. So the example I gave was if you wanted to navigate to the Reading League conference and you just put Illinois to your GPS, you might end up in the middle of random Illinois. You might not even end up in Chicago, right? And if you put Chicago, Illinois, you'll end up in the center of Chicago, Illinois. That's still closer to the conference, but really what was most precise is if you described the exact address at which the Hilton is located. And it's not a guarantee that you will get to your destination, but if you were to give a more precise description to ChatGPT of what you wanted, the likelihood that you actually get steered to your desired outcome is much higher than if you were more vague with your directions. So sometimes the onus is on the user when they get a response they don't want to be more precise and come up with different techniques for trying to massage ChatGPT into providing the desired response. And finally, the third reason I make this analogy is because of the training data. So when Apple Maps or Google started mapping out our physical universe with streets, highways, alleys, lakes, geographic features, etc., they have these either satellites that are orbiting in the air to get trained on the layout of our physical world, or in Google's case, they had those Street View cars that would drive around and literally try to figure out if you've seen Street View. It's because Google has had cars with cameras driving around. Similarly, these generative AI models have been trained on billions and billions of examples of text. And that includes written articles, that includes whole books that were offline and probably were copyrighted, that includes message boards and forums. They've been really trained on the entirety of the internet. And so they're pretty good at pattern matching across different domains because they have all of this training data, so to speak. Their roads and highways are figuratively the text that you actually see if you were just Google searching.
That's so interesting. That makes it so much easier to understand when you put it into that context. And I'm laughing even as you're giving the analogy because my parents were like Atlas people. You bought an Atlas book and you're consulting the map. And this was even before MapQuest, trying to find the road. And
Totally.
I accustom it to, from a teacher point of view, of lesson planning by hand and trying to think of everything from your brain, or consulting books and encyclopedia yourself without internet, and how laborious that can be. And with the ability to Google something, how much that even changed it. And so the new technology, how it's streamlining things for educators, it's really revolutionary.
Yeah, and I guess it's been around a little bit now. So even as they release new features, sometimes it's not that holy you-know-what moment that maybe ChatGPT was for everybody's first usage, but these models have continued to evolve. So I remember in early versions of ChatGPT, they didn't necessarily have memory of your conversations. Now they have memory of previous things you've discussed and will make recommendations for you. So disclaimer, like be careful about what information you feed it. Or you can now generate images. You can upload files. You can do a bunch of things that are both different from what you used to be able to do. And the quality of the results that come back are getting better and better and better too, as they get more sophisticated at how to train these models well. So it's not a static field. It feels like truly every week there's something in the world of AI where people who are really in this world are like, wow, that's another step function improvement.
And it's helpful to know that your output's only as good as your input, despite whatever training the model is able to do. Your prompting is really important in that respect. And you think about foundational literacy skills. Can you speak to why these larger language models like ChatGPT aren't equipped for that kind of work, and how something like Project Read AI can handle more of this? We're looking at the phonology of words and the phonetic decoding, sound symbol correspondences, something that ChatGPT is kind of bad at.
Yeah. And I'll give it credit because it's gotten better over time, but there are still some inherent limitations and reasons why it naturally is not very good at these foundational skills applications. So in that analogy I made, the corpus of the internet, all the written text out there that it's trained on, are the figurative roads, alleyways, highways, etc. The issue is that as ChatGPT actually goes and maps all of these examples, the most granular unit that it thinks of is tokens. And tokens might not mean anything to us as lay people, but it's essentially these little IDs that are associated with more or less every word. I think at that talk I showed that for OpenAI, like their token system has bench as one token, and then it has crisp as two tokens, and it like breaks down where the CR are one token and the ISP are another token. And in some cases, it might seem like it's following some notion of blends or letter sound correspondences. In others, it's not, because benches is also one token, right? So all of which is to say, our understanding of written language and spoken language merges in this notion of grapheme-phoneme correspondences. These AI systems, by and large, do not think of the world in grapheme-phoneme correspondences. They think of the world in these tokens, which are more or less whole word level tokens. So their granular understanding of how letters and sounds come together is not actually innate to them. If you ask them to like map a word, it might be able to do it. It's gotten better at it, but it's actually trying to triangulate patterns about what it thinks might be the case. So somebody recently gave me an example where it told them that the word swam had a vowel team in it. And we know that's not the case. It was hallucinating and making stuff up because it doesn't actually have an inherent understanding of how letters and sounds correspond in the way that we do.
And I remember when ChatGPT was first becoming more of a thing, I personally, I'm a writer, I'm a creative. I love to dabble in my own creative work. I love to write a good decodable sentence or two. But I'm like, let me see what ChatGPT can do. Write me 10 decodable sentences using this pattern. And I was like, wow, this is really awful. Almost none of these are correct. So it's just interesting to hear that that's not what it's been trained to do. That's not what it's equipped to do. And to take it with a grain of salt to know its limitations too. And that there are other tools like yours that have been trained to understand the breakdowns of the grapheme-phoneme correspondences. So can you walk us through what Project Read AI's specialized model can do that ChatGPT can't?
Sure. Yeah, we have a bunch of different specialized approaches and models we take for different parts of the app. But fundamentally, what we've done is built our own system of tokens almost for mapping all the grapheme-phoneme correspondences in English language, and then being able to flexibly on the fly do a couple things. One, break down any word into those GPCs or Elkonin boxes as a teacher would. But two, understand where those correspondences actually become fair game in every given scope and sequence we support. So if you wanted to just send me a random passage that you generated with ChatGPT, I'd copy and paste that into an internal tool that we have where we can precisely assess the decodability down to the percentage point. And we could figure out which words were not decodable, which parts of those words specifically made them not decodable or not yet decodable. So we've built this system internally that we have used to improve the tools that we make available to educators to actually build decodable text and to really rigorously measure the quality of those, at least the decodability of those texts as well. And that kind of mapping system and that measurement system allows us to create decodable texts. It also allows us to do some things around speech recognition and supports that. So it's almost this whole extra layer on top of any of the general AI systems we've tried to adapt that allows us to control quality really through a literacy lens that wouldn't otherwise just be in those if you were trying to prompt them directly. I think we released the first decodable generator in 2023. I was working on this in grad school around and or before the time ChatGPT was even released. I was using some of OpenAI's tools working on this at the time ChatGPT was released because they had some internal tools that people could work with and we had access to them. And it wasn't good enough. I was getting like, even at the time, I was like at 70% decodability. And then by the time we released the first version of the decodable generator, we'd gotten up to the high 80s. And now over time, we're at around 98% decodability. And I've seen some other decodable generators that have come up since then. Some are pretty good to their credit. And then some are purportedly decodable and they're just not. So even if you're not using ChatGPT, I've seen some general less literacy focused sites that have decodable generators that clearly are just hitting ChatGPT in the background and they're not decodable.
Yeah. And what's really cool about your decodable generator is, like you mentioned, you have different programs, scope and sequences associated with a Project Read AI. So you can say, I am using UFly lesson 58 and literally click the drop down and boom, it's like anything that was taught to that point would be included. So it's really tailored to whatever scope and sequence at hand. How many scope and sequences actually do you have?
I think we have 6, and then we have a couple that are not public with like larger school systems that have their own scope and sequences that we've built to support them. But yeah, to your point, this has been also like an educational process, I think, for some of our users, because I have teachers that email me sometimes that don't quite understand that a decodable text isn't just, oh, build me a decodable text on blends. A decodable text is only decodable insofar as it aligns to not just a scope and sequence, but a given point of that scope and sequence. Because the same text might be 95% decodable at one point and it becomes 100% decodable later, right? Based on those concepts that have been introduced. And sometimes I'll even get questions from people like, oh, I can't generate decodables for UFly lesson 6. And the answer is, that's right. We actually have that grayed out. You can't click on it because we don't yet have enough letter sound correspondences that have been taught to reliably generate decodable text. Even if you were a human, you might be able to get one sentence or a couple words, but you don't have enough patterns or surface area yet to work with. So I do think, besides trying to really align to how decodable texts are constructed, it's been also like educational for some of our teachers that are still also making the shift themselves.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the perks of using these tools too, is even if you have decodable text at your disposal, whether your school has invested in some commercial vendors and they purchase decodables, or if you have passages at length, the thing I always hear from teachers is like, they need more resources, they need more things to practice without reading or rereading the same thing all of the time with all of your kids. So it's also just a nice way to have variety in your toolkit.
Yeah, it's funny. We recently we're doing like a survey of some of the district admin we work with, and asked them, because a lot of them have different tools on the platform. You can pick and choose what you want. We don't try to shoehorn everybody into buying everything. And they were like, the decodable generator is like pixie dust. If you want a way to immediately elevate students' engagement, especially those that are older and might be bought out or tired of phonics or self-conscious about the fact that they need to still work on foundational skills, that has been our surefirest way to just raise engagement of our students, which was really cool to hear.
Amazing. And then, so you have a couple of other tools on the platform, like the UFly portal and then your AI tutor. Can you explain the functions of each of those?
Absolutely. So the UFly portal, like our teacher tools, is teacher facing. So our decodable generator, teacher facing. It's just for teachers to, quickly go generate text. And we also have a decodable games generator, fluency passage generator, etc. But these are all examples of teacher tools that are meant to just create one-click resources. The UFly portal is also a teacher facing tool, but what's a little bit different about it is it actually is intended to really help you support individual students with data that's responsive to their needs. So if you are implementing the UFly Foundations program in a Tier 1 setting, what you should be doing is providing weekly progress monitoring that's based on the 2 lessons that you taught that week for the first time, the 2 new concepts. And it's a dictation assessment and just supposed to be a quick check. And ideally, you use that encoding data to look at which grapheme-phoneme correspondences a student clearly understands, which ones they don't, and then find those students for each newly taught skill and group them by kind of intensity of additional support needs. Now, this whole process UFly provides training on, and it's accessible, and it's essentially open source once you have the manual for how to do it. However, it's the part of the program that is most time consuming for teachers. And the time it takes to analyze 20 unique student pieces of work and group them based on your grading of the new concept points, which are down to the grapheme-phoneme correspondence, and then create those small groups for the next week. But not only do that, also figure out what to teach each of those small groups, what activities to do with them when they're at your little kidney bean table, right? That's a lot for a teacher, both in terms of time and in terms of just like cognitive prep that's required to go into that. So UFly asked us about the possibility of partnering on an assessment portal or progress monitoring portal now over 18 months ago. And it came to life over that time with several rounds of pilots and iterations. And I still always say it's an ever evolving tool. So we're adding more and more to it. But fundamentally what it does is you enter your students' encoding data either by typing in the misspelled words or by scanning it in and editing it as needed, because sometimes AI is not going to read student handwriting as well as you'd want. But more or less, this takes about 10 minutes to input for a given classroom. But what it does is it automatically then spits out your small groups for the next week for both concepts that were taught, as well as exactly what to do from the UFly manual down to the page number and activity. And the thing that I really love about this is not only does it save teachers about an hour of time each week for this process if they were to do that with fidelity, what we also heard during the pilot from so many teachers was that it made them more confident about the instruction they were putting in front of students during that time because those recommendations are coming from the UFly team. So when I talk about specialized models and approaches, we're not just YOLOing it and telling AI to generate lesson plans for these students. No, this is really expert targeted guidance that we are simply feeding from the UFly team to teachers based on their specific data.
That's so interesting. And when I was in high school, calculus class, my teacher, he was like, you can use a calculator as long as you pass this calculator test. And so if you were able to do your simple arithmetic and be able to solve whatever math problem, solve the computation in your head, then you earned your spot to have a calculator. And I think of it in the same way, like teachers should be able to know how to group their students, how to analyze the data, have the wherewithal to figure out data analysis and grouping and all of these important things. But it's like their calculator. It's like their cheat code. We want to be able to save teachers the time and resources to be able to do their jobs effectively. And teaching is harder than it's ever been. So anything that can just take something off their plates, I think is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, no, it's been really well received. And there's things that we're continuing to add and improve within it, which I'm really excited about. But to your point, I think the ideal scenario, and every expert teacher I know really takes ownership of their professional learning and wants to understand these processes start to finish if they're implementing a program like UFly. The reality, though, is we have a lot of teachers in the field that are new to teaching or that are making the shift into structured literacy or whose schools are changing programs for the fourth time in 5 years, right? And to the extent that we can save their time and kind of streamline this for them, as well as one of the things that we added actually in the tool was not just providing the groups and the lesson plans. One of the pieces of the feedback that came back from teachers is we would love to see the rationale for how this came together. Why am I seeing these students with these activities? And so we added another screen in the portal that's called the timetable view that walks you through why certain students are seen 5 days a week for additional support, why certain students are seen 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and it's color coded to match UFly's PD on this as well. And so really trying to make it an educative tool and almost an embedded professional learning tool that explains these are not magic beans were thrown out here. There's a process for how this inputted spelling data is turned into groups and lesson plans. And here's the connection for you.
Yeah, so interesting. And then when it comes to the AI tutor, can you share a bit about what that does?
Yeah, it's funny. I think that was actually, if I were to give the longer version of how we started, that was the tool that really first came to mind for me, even in parallel with the decodable texts, because when I was teaching, I never had enough time to give individual students the amount of feedback and reps that they needed to become fluent readers. And some of my students got it pretty quickly, but there were so many students that needed additional reps, and not just reps, but productive reps with somebody there helping provide correction and feedback. And I couldn't do it. It logistically wasn't possible. So The AI tutor really was our first idea, and we spent a ton of time early 2023, starting in January, working on building something where we could really personalize the text that students were seeing based on what their skills gaps were, have them read that text out loud and get real-time feedback like a tutor might provide. And not exactly, because I know that actual tutors are doing a whole lot more than just providing feedback on the grapheme-phoneme correspondence, but they're also out of range for so many families, unfortunately, in terms of price. So the idea was to provide some AI version of this where we could, with really high quality design of the system, listen to students speak out loud down to the phoneme level and provide that real-time response. I think that is still, for me, the tool that I am most optimistic will directly move student outcomes, and we have some data to support that in tandem with the teacher. So it requires a teacher to set the student up, to put them on word mode or fluency mode, move them back and forth as they see fit. They advance in the scope and sequence based on the UFly scope and sequence based on their proficiency of a given concept at a given point in time. But teachers get all of that data. They get daily emails with patterns from their classroom that are emerging. And that's really what that co-teacher notion comes out of, right? Is how can this support teachers with things that we don't have enough time to do? We don't have enough time to make sure that each child gets 30 minutes of reading out loud each week with us and providing that real-time feedback, especially in a way that aligns to hopefully the scope and sequence you're using. So we've seen some really promising early data that we're excited to share more about, especially as it's published in the coming months. But for me, that's one of those things where I don't want a ton of screen time necessarily, but if we can get productive, targeted feedback for less than 10 minutes a day, I'm really optimistic that there's no reason why every student can't reach the decoding threshold just through getting enough reps that unfortunately a lot of us don't have enough time to provide.
So interesting. And this feels really different than some tech programs where students sit on a computer and click through and they're adaptive, and who knows if they're even paying attention to whatever is on the screen because they're giving an input in terms of their voice. They're reading aloud. It's listening to language, right? So it really is more authentic than just to be clicking through.
It's kind of funny, the analogy, and I haven't thought about this before, but as you were saying this, something just came to mind. So I'm talking in real time, and we'll see how this thought forms. But the same way that for so long, the common practice in elementary school classrooms was to have silent sustained reading time, it feels to me like oftentimes with legacy technology tools that students have had, it's just almost giving them a tool that's more like digital babysitting, but doesn't actually demand any sort of show of what they can do. And I think there's almost an analogy for making students read out loud digitally in the way that we're trying to do and validating what they can do and providing support where they can't, versus what I think has been a lot of screen time in schools, which feels more analogous to silent sustained reading for me, where they can just tap and click their way through screens without any real demonstration of what they've learned. And similarly, it's funny, in my time in the classroom, I never thought I was going to build ed tech. I truly didn't. I don't think there was a tool that I had that, there were some tools that were better than others, but I don't think there was one I had that was like, I love this. My students love this. This is awesome. I had more teacher-facing resources that I used than anything for students. And so I have tried to build something that feels like it could truly move the needle for the students that need it most, and try to measure that as much as we can and improve it in response to it.
There you go. Well done on that analogy. It came together really nicely.
Thank you.
It's so nice actually to hear someone in ed tech say that you are aware of the implications of screen time, and the goals that you have are not necessarily to keep kids on the screen. It's to change literacy outcomes, and using tools really wisely and efficiently, I think, is part of your mission. So what would you say from this ed tech perspective about, people having fears around screen time or the rise of technology for kids and all of the scary stuff that comes along these types of conversations?
I don't think that those fears are irrational. I think that we've all seen young people, grown people that are glued to their phones that have become quasi-zombies, right? And we think, and for good reason, that might start really early. I think the harder thing is to figure out how to navigate those conversations with nuance. And obviously, I love my analogies, so I'm going to give you another one. calories. I don't think all calories are bad. I don't think all calories are created equal. I think, unfortunately, what a lot of screen time is, though, is empty calories. And the question is, how do we find the right caloric intakes, both in protein versus too many fats, the types of fats, right? Because not all fats are created equal either, but make sure that in limited targeted doses and with good reason, the screen time that we do provide is actually helpful for students and does not come with the downsides of extended time on screen. So I also think that if we could do what I was doing off screen, that would be ideal. I haven't figured out how to do that, right? So I think really it's more about technology as a means to the end. And for me, the end I've been focused on since I was 16 was how do we change the educational outcomes of students in this country and decouple them from zip code, from race, from income? Because right now, that's so much of what correlates with how students actually end up in school. So for me, I'm singularly focused on that end goal. And if screens need to be a targeted part of the solution because we don't have enough time to provide feedback, let's do that with the close and careful navigation of how much screen time and whether it's actually worth it for the aim that we're pursuing. But similar to the fact that I don't think any serious phonics program is intending to teach every single grapheme-phoneme corresponds to the English language. You're hoping to get students to escape velocity. That's what I think the goal here is too, is how do we get students to escape velocity? Because so many of them don't ever get to that point or get to it so late where the costs in school have become enormous upon them.
Yeah. So we can liken that Project Read AI to hearty protein rich meal.
Ideally. I mean, I think we really in earnest try to make sure that that's the case. And there's not a whole lot of gamification. There's no badges. There's some stars that accumulate, but they have no utility. I think kids probably would like to see what we're doing more gamified. And, maybe there's a thoughtful way to do that. But we've been really focused on what does the research say that students need? And is there a way to build a credible and effective digital analog for that?
Yeah. And I think a lot of educators will be appreciative to the simplicity behind that portion of it and really just sticking true to the heart of what it's meant to do rather than influence kids' brains in a different type of way. So another big topic in this whole AI conversation that people are fearful of is, do you think AI is going to replace teachers one day, or teachers out of a job and the robots are going to take over and teach all of our kids? And from an ed tech point of view, what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, this is another hot button topic. And my answer, first and foremost, is I'm an educator, and I hope not. I also don't think so. For better and for worse, our schools look pretty similar to how they looked in 1925. And we've moved really slow. And I don't think that's always a good thing. But in this case, I think it might end up being a good thing that we move thoughtfully and that we don't reflexively try to remove teachers, because teachers ultimately provide, yes, a ton of incredible introduction to and practice of concepts across a variety of disciplines and wear a bunch of different hats. And some of those hats are instructional and some of those hats are not instructional. But I don't want to create a world or be a part of a world where we're trying to remove teachers, because that's such like a foundational experience. All of us can talk about our favorite teachers. So I don't think it's going to happen for practical reasons. There's just too much that teachers do that no tech or AI can change, in my view. I just don't think that's possible. Now, maybe there's an argument that the mix of a teacher's time that goes towards being an instructional expert in every discipline versus helping students connect ideas across disciplines and facilitating learning as a process across those, as opposed to just being a content. Like maybe the mix of teacher tasks change in the long run, but I'm dubious. But I also say that with the understanding that we need education to change. I'm not okay with the status quo. And I don't put that on teachers, but we should not collectively be okay with the status quo, either in literacy outcomes or in another host of outcomes. There was this study that came out about students at the University of California, San Diego recently that really created waves in the world of math education, where students at one of the top public schools or public universities in the country are largely needing remedial math. I looked at Gallup data recently that showed that Americans think more highly of our healthcare system by a 2-to-1 ratio than they do our public education system. I'm also seeing in the public school system that I grew up, a ton of families fleeing to outlying suburban school districts that are better resourced, right? There is flight from our nation's public schools generally, and particularly large urban districts. And I think we have to be willing to acknowledge that we need to drive better outcomes and say, hey, the status quo is not okay, while also saying that doesn't mean that we should just be turning over all of our instruction to AI. I don't think that's the right reflexive reaction either.
I appreciate your acknowledgement of the importance of the humanity behind this work and how there's heart in the teacher's role and responsibility behind the things that they artfully choose for their students too. And I totally understand this perspective too of there's an urgency that we need to change things on our current literacy landscape and educational landscape in general. Things don't look good. And AI is here to stay. Technology is here to stay. It's like you were saying in the beginning, it's only growing and advancing every single day. And we need people like you. In my experiences with you, your moral compass is pointing north with the right heart in mind and wanting to use technology, I think, in a way that's going to revolutionize change in a positive way. And I think that gives me confidence in the future too. So I appreciate all of the work that you do.
It's funny. I was in grad school and I was feeling like education's always been my heart. I was truly feeling a bit burnt out though. I told you about all the different hats I'd been wearing. I think as I saw AI developing in 2022, I had the realization that this will change education one way or another. And I don't know, and this was before starting Project Read. I didn't know exactly what it would take. I was messing around with decodables in a grad school class, et cetera. And I knew that early literacy, in my view, was the most important problem we could solve. But I think at the time I was like, this will change education, and it really is important for folks that have been in the classroom, that deeply care about our public schools, not just schools that serve the affluent, though they deserve to be served as well. I just thought I need to get in the arena, for lack of a better term, because not that I have all the answers, but unfortunately, I think we oftentimes have teachers over here and technologists over here, and they kind of operate in silos. And if they're brought together, there's like this huge coordination penalty because they're different groups and somebody's trying to project manage between them. And for me, I think the fact that I'm able to credibly wear both hats, even though I'm not the expert teacher that so many folks at the Reading League Conference might have been, for example, and we'll be the first to say that, or I'm not the software engineer that my co-founder Corey is, I know enough about both disciplines to at least have a point of view that I hope is grounded in the human experience that really is schooling at its core.
Amazing, amazing work. And at one point you were talking about data coming down the pipe. So is there any new projects or upcoming features or maybe even potential research that we should be looking forward to or that you're excited to share?
We have a pre-publication version of it, but Dr. Matt Burns at the University of Florida Literacy Institute analyzed some of our pilot data last year and has written that up and showing significant growth on ORF for students, particularly for students who started the year below the 50th percentile, which I find really exciting because ultimately we want the impact of our tools to be felt and felt most strongly by students that need them the most. So that's one. And two, there's just a lot more research that's currently in progress. And so I'm excited to share more about that as it develops, but that first study is the main one that I think will be more concrete in the coming months, and we'll share that when we can. And then we also have a ton of just more district-run pilots and data that have piled up and that we've seen results from as they've analyzed it, which is really exciting. One that I'm hoping to spotlight in maybe a conversation like this at some point is with a district that did a middle school pilot for students that needed phonics support and who'd been in the district since they were kindergartners, but were still reading at roughly that point in the core phonics survey where they're at the end of kindergarten or first grade with their decoding ability. So that was an extremely successful pilot, and I just want to spotlight that as well. So there's a lot more research that is in motion, and I'm really excited about it. And it's also not just on product that's static. We continue to evolve it and try to evolve it in response to those research findings, as well as what we're hearing from teachers and students every day.
That's incredible. Congratulations. I'm excited to hear more about the influence it's having all over. And this is nationwide, correct? Or have you gone international?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is we just really started, and we still have a super small team. We started by just building stuff that teachers would love and share. And we have really no sales or marketing to speak of. We don't have tables at conferences and stuff like this. And that's part of what's allowed us to keep our costs low. And maybe at some point we'll start to do a bit more of that because we're overdue on it. But we really just try to build something that teachers would share. So at this point, we're in over 150 countries where teachers have used the program. Not all of them use every tool on the site. Everybody can pick what's most useful for them. But yeah, we've had students and teachers all over the world, which is really cool. I went to South Africa for a friend's wedding about this time last year and visited 3 schools that were using our tools. And they were very different types of schools, and they were all using our tools. And I don't know, it felt really cool to see in action.
That is so cool. And like you shared in your bio that you're in 50% of elementary schools. So a huge accomplishment.
Well, at least one teacher in each of those schools. That doesn't mean that we're a core part of their program. I'd love for that to, become, especially with the tutor and the portal that are so connected to student data, be something that is a part of their strategy over time. But yeah, we really have been teacher first and bottoms up. And I hope that, doesn't change even as we start to become more sophisticated about how we partner with admin on training and stuff like that.
Definitely. I know that whatever teachers I've encountered who've utilized your tools are so appreciative of what you have to offer on the site. And then if you have one message for a teacher who might be hesitant to try some of the tools on Project Read AI, what would it be?
That's a good question. I don't think there's anything I could tell you or should tell you. I think you should ask a colleague if they've tried it and if it was helpful. And that's probably your best indicator about whether you should try it out. And if they say no, don't. And if they say yes, give it a shot.
There you go. They'll probably say yes.
Right? But no, it's been a lot of fun to do, and I appreciate you taking the time to have me on and share my perspective.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And then where can listeners connect with you further and learn more about the tools and the platform?
First and foremost is www.projectread.ai. That's the main site. You can go sign up for a free teacher version of the account yourself and get started. Your admin can fill out the interest form if you actually want to bring the full versions of our tools to your school. And then on social, we are on Instagram, we're on TikTok at Project Read AI. And I have a nascent Twitter account or X account where I'm posting my thoughts more and more often. And I think I'm still below 100 followers and I mostly, speak into the ether. But if you want to stay more in the loop with some of just my thoughts on this intersection between AI and structured literacy, like we've talked today, I'll probably keep trying to post there a little bit.
There you go. Even if it's in the ether, somebody's listening and it's valid.
It's also good for me, right? Like independent of whether anybody else sees it or responds. I think sometimes writing for any of us is worth it, even if it's seen by no other eyes, because it helps you clarify your own thing. So
absolutely.
I'll continue to try to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, this has been such a great conversation, Viv. I'm so appreciative for you taking the time and enlightening us all about this movement. And we'll see where we are a year from now.
I know. No, it's continually evolving. And I'm sure that even, who knows, maybe when we do this again in a year from now, I'll have a different perspective.
Definitely. Thank you so much for tuning into Literacy in Color. I hope today's episode left you feeling both inspired and equipped with something new to add to your teaching toolkit. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would truly mean so much to me if you'd leave a 5-star review. It helps other educators find the show and join our colorful community. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For more tips, tools, and resources, be sure to check out the links in the show notes at michelleandthecolorfulclassroom.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, be colorful and teach colorfully.